Well, welcome. Today is July 19th, 2015. My name is Carl Connor. Welcome to the Stepping Stones Project. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 2, What of Pleasure? This is where we'll see some interesting things there for Mr. Solomon, or King Solomon, his name is. This is a famous painting, idea what King Solomon might have looked like. And this is somebody visiting him. This is called Queen Sheba. She came up out of Africa because she had heard about this great wisdom she brought with. She's the one with holding the staff in the white and yellow, by the way. And, good morning, Mr. Paul. So glad you could join us. Just in time for the sermon. I think Nate's got a seat saved for you. All right, so let's read about this particular meeting in 1 Kings. Now, when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. And that word hard questions, by the way, in Hebrew means riddles or puzzling type questions thing there. So she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices, very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing hidden from the king that he could not explain to her. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house he had built, the food of his table, the seating of his officials, the attendance of his servants, the clothing, the cupbearers, his burnt offerings that he had offered at the house of the Lord, there was no more breath in her, which is to say, she had nothing more to say. So let's turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And so we know, of course, that King Solomon is the wisest of the wise. The Lord has granted him, or had granted him, wisdom beyond any other man. And he's reached a point where in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, he's trying to figure out what lasts, what makes sense, what makes a difference, what is important in terms of our world and the things that we do, or to say it another way, what is not just chasing or striving after the wind, what has an importance here. So verse 1, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. So he, as Solomon, is speaking to his own heart, and he's saying, go ahead, run rampant. Whatever you as my heart desires, I will do for you. And let's see where this goes. So he's testing himself. But behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? So now let's pause for a second, and I want you to bear in mind as you're thinking about these things, think about whether you agree or disagree with some of his statements, because there's going to be some that I certainly disagree with, and I'll try to highlight there, and I think that they're presented in a negative sense. And so you have to watch, because if you quote it out of context, you really can lead yourself somewhat astray here. So I say it often, and sorry, it kind of bears repeating for the fun of it, but that, when you talk about a biblical text, we use the word a proof text. A proof texting is when you take one verse out of context and use it to be able to prove your point and go forth and do that. And so the classic example, as I mentioned before, is that if you ask, does the Bible say that there is no God? And the answer is, of course it does. You can go and quote it, and I can find it for you in Psalms, actually it's in Proverbs, that there is no God. But then you read it in context, and the context is, the fool says in his heart, quote, there is no God. Context is everything in that particular sense. So looking at the context of what Solomon is saying here, and of course the pieces I think are very important. So laughter, it is mad. Have any of you all ever been spiritually healed, helped at least, by laughter? Have laughter ever spiritually lightened your spirits? Has laughter in a good way? You know what I'm saying? Has that ever been something that's helped you out? I know it has absolutely lightened my spirit. And now it can be a defensive mechanism you hide behind as well. I've used it that way. I think others of you probably do as well. And I don't necessarily know that that's totally bad, but if it's used as a total escapism, that's not necessarily helpful in my opinion. But I will argue that there, no offense, here's a question you won't hear me ask often. Do you think Jesus ever laughed at any jokes? Picture Jesus, picture him in his life, picture in his ministry, picture Jesus. Sure. Yeah. Did Jesus find some stuff funny? Absolutely. It would be kind of boring if he didn't. I have difficulty imagining that. I think that there's some parts that certainly amused him. And I don't mean necessarily in a negative way either. There's some of the things that amused him about things there, but I certainly mean it in a positive way. So when he says of laughter, it is mad, don't take that to mean that in fact there's nothing in laughter, but laughter for laughter's sake. Comedy for comedy's sake is what I think that Solomon is saying here. And of pleasure, what use of it? Well, so of the various types of pleasure that Solomon's going to talk about, we're going to see some things that simply don't result in anything that is helpful and long-lasting, not striving after the wind. So let's look at verse 3. I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. So how can I make myself happy through alcohol? Well, that's an interesting question, right? And then he puts there, and I highlighted in red, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly. So how, using alcohol, could I make myself happy? But mind you, I'm still really wise. And I highlight that comment for you there because he really is pushing the edge here. He's going to go as far as he can to the edge, and he's going to say, but it's okay, I still have my wisdom to guide me. And I think you're going to find, I'll argue at least at the end of the sermon today, that I think his reliance upon his wisdom is going to lead him astray, that this is not going to end well for him, and we're going to see where exactly this leads to, and I'll kind of come back to that as a theme back in our takeaways at the end. This idea of my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and look for that theme because it's going to occur several times today. So, and how to lay hold of folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So what are some of the things he did? Starting in verse 4. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. And therein lies, I think, the heart of the problem. Right there. I'll say that again. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. Ginger got it. Yes, for myself. I did this for myself. Not I did it with the Lord's help for the Lord. Y'all catch. There's two problems in the sentence there. It's the I did it. It was all on me. It was my great skill, my great planning, and I did it for myself. And I found this, we're going to find out, to be at the end vanity chasing after the wind. Yep, you're exactly correct. I find it interesting in him testing, and this is, I think that's part of the point of Ecclesiastes, is that, he doesn't say as much. He doesn't talk about, there are some things he did do for the Lord. He did some great things for the Lord. He built the temple temple of Solomon, Solomon's temple, for the Lord, and I think that some great good came of that, right? And so from that, we have this pattern here, and so he provides a negative example in here. It's not that building houses and vineyards is necessarily evil. It's that doing it for your own glory is evil, or at least not helpful, if y'all follow the point. And so therein lies. And so Sheree and I were talking about some friends of ours back in Kentucky. There's one of the husband in the couple. His name's John. And John is a really important member, or has been for years, in Kentucky Baptist Builders. And so what do? Well, they're primarily carpenters by trade. And so they take, one of their vacations for a week-long vacation each year, and they come together and they go somewhere in Kentucky, and there's typically anywhere from 20 to 50 of them carpenters. And a church may be building, they may be building a new church, maybe building a new wing on a church, like an educational wing or whatever. And if you can imagine, 20 to 50 carpenters descending with their tools and all the stuff, they show up in their vans and they go after it 10-hour days and they hit it hard. And a week later, there's a scaffolding. There's a complete church there, if you follow my point. I mean, it may be under roof, maybe with sheetrock up, and they pull away a week later, and where you had level land, you got a church. Okay, granted, you guys still got somebody else to do electricity and plumbing, and it's not done, but you get my point. It's, they have to coordinate with other folks if they're going to get the sheetrock up that week. But from their part, that's what they do. And they build the house for the Lord's glory. And I've seen some of their work, and I've seen the radiance upon their faces. And it's all in 2x4s and 2x6s and sawdust that they're doing their work. And it really glorifies the Lord. So how is that different, if you will, than what obviously Solomon did? And I think the answer is obvious. They've done it for the glory of the Lord. And I'm really proud of them in that work that they have done. And so think about that as you're thinking through these things and what exactly Solomon is up to. He's saying, do this for your heart, do it for yourself, and see what you find. And he finds the answer pretty quickly, I think, but he still continues on. Verse 6, I made for myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. And so this is kind of continuing the idea of the vineyards. Verse 7, I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. So I commented to Shree, it's sort of interesting that there's probably some overarching concept here. Both, Paul in the New Testament and numerous places in the Old Testament mention this idea of slaves, and slavery is a piece that's there. And they describe this condition, if you will, of working with slaves and having the treating them well and so forth. And you get the idea that they're probably treated better than certainly other slaves that are there. But you don't see this overarching statement that I would love to see, which is against slavery as an institution. And because of that, because there's not that statement, as we're fond of saying, both in the Civil War, both the North and the South read the same Bible and both justified their actions using the Bible. Okay. So I think from an overarching statement of freedom and so forth, and I'm not going to go in too far down this pathway here, this rabbit hole, but there are things that are in the Bible that are tolerated, if you will, because they're focusing more on the spiritual condition of individuals. And it's not that the Bible was set out to change all of society, it's to change the people in the society is the point of it. I'm on a tangent now, and I apologize, but I think it's an important aspect here. You see these things. Additionally, not everything, as you're going to find out, that Solomon did is necessarily something to emulate. So just because Solomon had slaves, therefore, Solomon had wisdom from God, and he had slaves, therefore, I'm joking, it's okay for me to have slaves. If someone were to make that argument, it's simply not accurate. Additionally, Solomon had multiple wives. Does that mean it's okay for me to have multiple wives? No. God's purpose has always been for us to have, this man, one man, one woman. That's of course, our Christian viewpoint of marriage, and I certainly support that. But to go back, can you find biblical examples like King David, the only man after God's own heart, who had multiple wives? Yes. Does it mean you should emulate him? No. He also murdered a guy too, guys. Y'all follow? So some interesting pieces here. All right, so back to the story. Solomon does some things here that I wouldn't recommend doing, is my point. All right, so I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. When you talk about cash, King Solomon had cash. Okay, he had serious coin, and ways that in fact, I cut off the reading, but if you go back and read in 1 Kings about the quantity of gold that the Queen of Sheba gives him, it is a massive quantity of gold that she lays at his feet after answering all of her questions. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the children of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, ding, 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 my wisdom remained with me. Verse 10, whatever my eye desired, I did not keep from them. Let's pause and think about that for a second. How would each of you live your lives if you said, whatever my eyes desired, I will not keep from them? Amy, how many fly rods would you have? Paul, what would you have in terms of equipment there? Will, how many shotguns for ducks? Okay, how much woodworking equipment would I have? Right? I could go on from there, right? But whatever your eyes desired, you had unlimited money and you could buy anything your eyes wanted, anything your eyes rested upon, you could purchase it, get it, obtain it somehow. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. This guy had the resources. If you could imagine it, it existed. He could buy it, get it, obtain it somehow. You all follow? And so he had it all. And I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. If anybody ever had it all, it was this guy. If there was ever a time when one person had, if you will, all the brass rings in one stack, he had gotten it all. This is the one. All right. So turning from that, so I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Whoever comes after me, he can't top what I've already done. There ain't no way. I've done it all. I've built it all, seen it all, had every lady. I've done everything. I've tasted every food. I've done everything that there is to do. There's nothing he can do. Then I saw there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more to gain in light than in darkness. So this is good. This is where he sees that there is more to be gained, at least having wisdom and being able to do things that are right. This is good. This is a shining point here. Verse 14: the wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Put your hands on the keyboard. What's the same event? Yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. What is that? Yep, Eileen's death, death, death. Yes. At the end of the day, ashes to ashes and dust to dust, from which we came is what we will go to. That's, and even with all due respect, people who, I'm fascinated by people who spend a lot of money on some fascinating preservation techniques to embalm themselves and go into caskets with double sealed glass with pressurized, vacuum filled with nitrogen in an attempt to preserve their bodies perfectly as they are. This is fascinating science to try and, make things look, just the way it's supposed to be, if you'll follow my point. Right. Yeah. No, it's at the end. It's all going to come to the end. It's the same stuff, guys. It's all ashes to ashes and dust to dust. We all end up the same way. Okay. So in fact, I heard a really great sermon once upon a guy about a preacher who traveled. He's actually going to do a really big revival in L.A. and he got there and they lost his luggage. It's a true story. And they lost his luggage. And he had to preach the next morning. And so they said it would take a couple days, like maybe 24 hours before his luggage caught up with him. He's like, I have to preach. I'll be before a couple thousand people. So the people at the church, the big mega church, said, no problem, no problem. They ran him over and they found a spot where they could go and get a suit for him. And he didn't want to spend too much on it because he's just going to wear it for like one time. And so he didn't want to get something fancy. And so they said, no problem. There's suits that they use for when they're going to bury people. And they're not, the greatest material, but we can go get you set up for one really fast. There's a guy who's in the church. We can do it. And so they went and they got him and it looked okay. And he said, it's fine. I'll be in front of the lights. They're not going to see me that much anyway. That's fine. I'll be behind the podium. And so he got this piece and they got the suit and then he got dressed the next morning and he went out to preach. And he discovered that when they make suits for people who are dead, they don't have pockets. It's just like a flap on the coat looks like there's a pocket, but there's no pocket. In the pants, there's no material inside. There is no pocket. And so he changed his whole sermon because it's a really great illusion that when you're dead, you don't need pockets because you can't take it with you. If you all follow, I didn't mean to plan to do that illustration today, but it kind of popped in my head there. And so I thought I'd just kind of mention that to you. This is the essence of this. We all come to the same thing, and none of us can take any of the stuff with us. All right. When we're all done, it all goes back in the box, as they say. All the pieces go back in the box. Yet I perceive the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? What was the point? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come, all will be long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life. I'll pause on that for a moment. So I hated life. Solomon has reached a deep, dark rabbit hole of depression. He has put all this effort in trying to find enjoyment, and he got nada. He made some fundamental mistakes. Would you all agree with me on that? And the key part has to do with the earlier pieces, that he was doing it by himself, for himself. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after the wind. I hated Well, let's see if I got anything back there. Can anybody hear me? Testing again. Yay. Okay. Well, I hung up and called back in, and then suddenly I was here. Right. So let's see. I was making some phenomenal point when that happened. Let's see. Okay. So we'll go back to verse 18. You hated. Right. Okay. So you hated life. So verse 18. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but I pointed out that during the children's sermon, I mentioned that, of course, that this can be good, that we leave things to those to come after us. I use the example of the apple trees, that the orchards might take years to come to fruition, and some of the things that were there. And yet, from Solomon's perspective, because he can't have it for himself, he hates his toil. He hates that hard work. I would hope that you would never be in that state, guys. I would hope that you would never be in a position where you would hate so much what you're doing, just knowing that you won't be able to harvest it, but somebody else would be able to. So, verse 19, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Well, that's a great statement. Don't we all think that we're wise? Don't we all think that we're sort of on the wise side? Okay, let me. Sheree's shaking her head. She's not so sure. Okay, let's go with this. There's one thing we can all completely agree on. Deep down, we're all pretty much good drivers. How about that? Is that more or less? So, okay, Sheree, not okay. That's Will says okay. Eileen says no. Ginger says, well, yeah. Amy and Deanna are going, well, of course we're good drivers. Okay. So who knows whether we'll be wise or a fool, right? And in fact, we're not all good drivers. But nevertheless, yet he will be master of all of which I toiled, this other person, and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Wow, let's read that again. Verse 20. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair. Deep, deep depression here, guys. He is down, down, down deep. That he is in despair over all the toil that he has done, over all the things that are there. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. That's the part I lifted out for the children's sermon. I left out this part. This also is vanity and a great evil. I presented it because I disagree with this statement. I presented it in the opposite context from that perspective. Solomon is saying that this is wrong. What has a man for all his toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. All right, so this obviously are some points I disagree with from his, I'm saying he's presenting. I agree there's much more that we could do. And in fact, by providing for those that come after us, for future generations, for the things that come after us, for our children, these are the differences, of course, that we make. And I strongly disagree with Solomon there. Okay? For 25, Ginger says, how depressing. Yes, I would agree. All right, so there you go. So this is a negative example. Verse 25. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For the one who pleases him, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. So the point of that, of course, is do it for the glory of God, which gets us, of course, to our takeaways. So maybe we should go to that. Ecclesiastes, I only have 2, by the way, and then we're gonna have communion today. So we'll wrap this up and go on to our communion time. Reminder, we're doing communion today, guys, if you had forgotten. We're going to do communion in just a few moments. Sheree says, I do think that God intends for us to work. I totally agree. God wants us to be useful. He wants us to be busy. He wants us to do things for him. But it's just that. He wants us to do things for him. And go from there. So, number 1, if you build or do for yourself, expect it to be short-lived. If you want it to have long-lasting effect, do it for the Lord. Now, bear in mind, I've said this multiple times before, but I'm going to repeat myself here. I'm not suggesting you do something, you get it almost done, and then you go, oh, by the way, God, please bless what I'm doing so it can be to you. It goes the other way. God is working, God is doing, we join him in his labor, what God's plan is, and then we're doing it for his glory. You don't make the whole plan, do it, and then, oh, by the way, bless this if you don't mind. Okay? So, key point there. So this is where Solomon says, I've made great works, built houses, and planted vineyards for myself. So number one, if you build and do for yourself, expect it to be short-lived. If you want it to have long-lasting effect, do it for the Lord. Okay? And so this is where you're constantly looking for God, where do you want me to work? What do you want me to do? And I'm always astounded by the people. I used the example from John Edwards earlier, that he's a carpenter and working building churches. It would be really easy, and I'm sorry to say this, to say, well, all I know how to do is work with 2x4s and 2x6s. What difference can that make for God? And the answer is, coupled together with other people, a huge, huge difference. Okay? And it can be multiplied many, many times over. So whatever your skills are, whether they're some, I mean, literally, whatever your skills are, I'll just say that, whatever they are, there's some way you can use them for the glory of God, either directly or indirectly. Number two. In fact, I'll just comment here. I saw this great video the other day on a guy whose ministry is sharpening chainsaws. And this sounds crazy, but he has this whole setup where he has like 5-gallon cans of gasoline and a little generator, and that powers a Dremel tool that he uses. And on the back of his truck, he goes through and sets up a thing to sharpen chainsaws. And he lives in the Midwest, and whenever there's like a natural disaster, like a tornado, he rolls into town and puts up a sign, chainsaw sharpening, because if you sharpen a chainsaw, it'll cut 3 to 5 times faster than a dull one. And people are doing relief work; they never have time to sharpen their own saws. And so he sharpened something in the ballpark. I forget the number, but I want to say it was thousands. He sharpened thousands of chainsaw blades during Katrina because he spent weeks down there sharpening blades. It's just a really cool, and that is his ministry. He doesn't charge a dime in a disaster for sharpening chainsaw blades. Chains. Y'all follow? And so, I mean, it's not the kind of thing that you might think of as a really godly ministry until you realize the work that's there. And what his policy was, it takes about 3 minutes to sharpen a blade. And when somebody would come by and say, "Can you sharpen it?" "Sure, I'll sharpen it for you. Can I talk to you while I sharpen?" "Sure." And he would present the gospel every time as he sharpened the blade. Chain. I said blades, chain. But anyway, you'll get the idea. All right, number two, stay well back from the edge. Don't think your wisdom will save you. Number two, stay well back from the edge. Don't think your wisdom will save you. By the edge, I mean the edge of lapsing into sin. So Solomon does this whole thing where he says, verse 3, "I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine." So how am I going to use alcohol to find pleasure? And so forth. My heart's still guiding me with wisdom. It's okay. I'm still the wisest man while I'm experimenting with alcohol and who knows what else. You know what I'm saying? To go through and do this. Because, of course, he said his eyes, whatever his eyes desired. So if he desired, and there were drugs at that time, that he would have tried that, or whatever it was, or with the things that are along that line. So what ends up happening to Solomon? Well, he ends up marrying first a wife out of Egypt, and then he starts going through and saying, well, what else do I want? Well, let's kind of go through. So this is a picture of Solomon in an older age with some of his wives around him. You get, I don't know if there's maybe 10 or 12 there, something like that. So let's read 1 Kings to chapter 11. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, among them the daughter of Pharaoh. That was, of course, his Egyptian wife. Then the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonian, Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, "You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods." Solomon clung to these in love. He had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines. I'll just pause for dramatic effect. Sigh. Yes, but he still had his wisdom. Would you agree that going down this pathway, he went into folly? Can I get an amen on that? 1,000 women, too much for any one dude. Yes. Okay. All right. And his wives turned away his heart. It wasn't just that he had so many wives. It was what the wives were teaching him and speaking to him, that he loved them dearly, and so they turned his heart. So this is interesting what happens. And his wives turned away his heart, for when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods. And his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord, as David his father had done. So a good way to remember some of the early kings here, just as a quick comment, I didn't put this on the slide, but maybe I should have. Does anybody know the name of the first king of Israel? The real tall dude. What's that big tall before David? What's that big tall? The first king. What's his name? His name is Saul. Right. So Saul's the first one. And then comes David, and then comes Solomon. And so a good way, if you want to jot this down to think about it, is Saul gave none of his heart to God. David gave all of his heart to God. Solomon gave half of his heart to God. I'll do that again. Saul gave none of his heart. David gave all. Solomon gave half. Okay, it's not precise, but you'll get the point. All of them respected God to some degree, and it's not this kind of messy math, but to get a concept for it, and this is what ends up happening. Saul, David, Solomon. You got it, right? And so none, all, half. All right, so from that perspective, can you see that he's saying over and over again in Ecclesiastes, but it's okay, I have my wisdom to guide me, but it's okay, I have my wisdom to guide me. Well, I don't think it ended well. That would be my argument. Okay, he went off the reservation, and that's what 1 Kings 11 tells us, and the end result of all that experimentation did not end well from that perspective. So that's why I say that there's a counterexample here. There's some wonderful wisdom from Solomon, and there's some pieces here. Please do not follow this part. So with that, let's get to our question of the week, and then we'll get on to communion. So what am I doing for myself in vain that I need to instead do for the Lord? Question of the week. What am I doing for myself in vain that I need to do instead for the Lord? Think about that. Think about what it is that you've been doing in your own effort. You're doing it, and you're doing it for yourself. And if you just changed it a little bit, you could have the power of the Lord with you, so you're not doing it by yourself, and you're doing it instead for His glory. And if in fact you can do that, maybe you would find that things would be quite a bit different. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord Heavenly Father, I thank you for all that you're doing in our lives. And as we go now to a time of communion, I just ask that you would be with us and bless us and help us to worship you through this process. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.